I stared at the number. $1,000. For the logo that had won design awards. For the brand that the article had called iconic. The arrogance was breathtaking. They hadn't even done their research. They saw my name on the website as the original brand designer and assumed I was a hired gun from the past who could be bought off for pocket change. They assumed I was small and that I would be intimidated by their massive corporate letterhead. It was Mr. Sterling and Leo all over again, just on a much larger scale. They were underestimating me. It was a mistake they would come to regret. I took the letter to Anya. She read it, then looked at our original settlement with Leo. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. It was the same smile I remembered from when I'd first shown her my binder of evidence against Leo. "Gracie," she said, her voice purring with delight. "This is delicious. They've made a fatal error." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Our settlement was very specific," she explained, tapping a clause on the page. "It compensated you for the work you performed and for the loan you provided. It gave you credit, but look at what it doesn't. Say it never ever says that you transferred the copyright of your designs to Leo or to Ascent Brewery. Under federal law, the creator of a work is the owner of the copyright unless it is explicitly signed away in writing." I felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. "What are you saying, Anya?" "I'm saying," she said, leaning forward, her eyes gleaming, "that Leo never owned his brand. It's been operating on an implicit license from you this whole time. I'm saying you own the logo. You own the labels. You own the entire visual identity of Ascent Brewery. And if Global Brew Corp wants to buy it, they don't have to negotiate with Leo. They have to negotiate with you." Revelation hit me with the force of a physical blow. I owned it. The mountain logo, the elegant typography, the entire aesthetic I had bled for it was still mine. The multi-million-dollar acquisition, the culmination of Leo's ambition, all hinged on a single overlooked detail. It all hinged on me. The power dynamic had shifted so seismically it was almost comical. My first move was to instruct Anya to respond to Global Brew's lawyers. Her letter was a masterpiece of polite, professional annihilation. To inform them that their offer of $1,000 was rejected, that their quitclaim was invalid, and that I, Clara Grace, as the sole proprietor of the copyright for all Ascent Brewery branding, was open to discussing a real acquisition of the intellectual property for a figure commensurate with its market value. It also included a formal cease and desist notice, informing Leo and Ascent Brewery that their implied license to use my copyrighted work was hereby terminated pending a new agreement. It was a declaration of war. The response was immediate and frantic. Global Brew's legal team tried to bluster, claiming the copyright was an implied work for hire. Anya disabused them of that notion, pointing out that I was never an employee. Then the call I knew was coming finally came. It was Leo. He didn't plead. He attacked. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Grace?" he yelled, his voice cracking with panic. "You're trying to ruin me.
Doctor.
All this time you're trying to sabotage the biggest moment of my life out of spite." I listened to him rave, and I felt nothing but a profound sense of detachment. The hurt was gone. The anger was gone. All that was left was business. "This has nothing to do with spite, Leo," I said calmly, my voice even and cool. "This is about intellectual property rights. It's a concept you should have familiarized yourself with when you built a multi-million-dollar brand on someone else's creative work without a contract. You and your buyers made an oversight. I'm simply correcting it." "You're a vindictive bitch," he spat. "No," I replied, a small smile touching my lips. "I'm a business owner, just like you. Okay, have your lawyers. Call my lawyer." I hung up. The negotiations were tense. Global Brew, a publicly traded company, could not move forward with an acquisition when the ownership of its target's core intellectual property was in dispute. The deal was on hold. Their lawyers, realizing they had no legal standing, shifted tactics. They tried to lowball me. They offered $100,000, then $250,000. I, through Anya, rejected them all. This wasn't just about the money. It was about the principle. It was about establishing the true value of my work, the value Leo had tried to erase. Finally, I agreed to a face-to-face meeting at Global Brew's corporate headquarters. Walked into a boardroom that screamed money and power. A long mahogany table, panoramic views of the city, and a half-dozen executives in expensive suits, including their CEO. Julian Croft was not their lawyer this time. But the men in the room had the same air of ruthless authority. Leo was there too, sitting at the far end of the table looking pale and furious. He was a prop in a meeting about his own company. I wasn't the heartbroken girl in a messy ponytail anymore. I was the CEO of Viridian Design. I wore a sharp, custom-tailored suit. I was flanked by Anya. I was their equal. I was in control. Let's be clear about why we're here, I began, my voice calm and confident. You want to buy a brand? I own that brand. The question isn't if I will sell. The question is what my terms are. Their CEO, a man named Henderson, leaned forward. Ms. Grace, we are prepared to make a final, very generous offer of $500,000 for the full and unencumbered rights. I smiled. That's a very generous offer. But I'm not just interested in cash. My brand, the one you want to buy, was built on a story of craft, authenticity, and passion. My terms for its sale will reflect those same values. I slid a proposal across the table. Anya had helped me draft it. It was my masterpiece. Term 1, I said. The purchase price for the intellectual property will be $1 million. This is non-negotiable. Reflects the fair market value of an iconic, award-winning brand identity. The executives exchanged glances. It was a high number, but for them, it was manageable. Term 2, I continued. Upon acquisition, the original brand identity is to be retired within 1 year. You may use it as a basis for a new design. You may reference it in your marketing, but you may not continue to use the exact work I created for Leo's company. That chapter is over. My work is not his legacy. Leo flinched as if I had struck him. This was a blow to his ego, far more than the money. In term 3, I said, my voice softening slightly. This is the most important one. Your acquisition price for Ascent Brewery is reported to be $7 million. My $1 million fee will not come from Global Brew. It will be deducted from the $7 million you are paying Mr. Leo. I paused, letting that sink in. Furthermore, an additional $1 million of Mr. Leo's payout will be placed into a charitable trust, also administered by Global Brew. Henderson looked confused. A charitable trust for what? You will call it? The Viridian Grant, I said, a genuine smile finally reaching my eyes. And it will provide seed money and mentorship to female entrepreneurs trying to start their own businesses in the craft, beverage, hospitality, and design industries. It will be a fund to help women who have the talent and the vision, but lack the capital. Women just like I was. You will get the good PR. The world will get more female-led businesses. And Mr. Leo will get a valuable lesson in what it truly means to build a legacy. The room was silent. Leo looked like he was going to be sick. I had not only taken his money, I had repurposed his victory into a tribute to my own resilience and a legacy for other women. I had taken his story and made it mine forever. The executives at Global Brew were savvy. They saw the genius of the move. The cost to them was the same. But instead of just a contentious IP buyout, they now had a story of empowerment, of supporting women in business. The PR value of the Viridian Grant was worth more than the $1 million that funded it. They agreed, all of it. The final meeting to sign the papers was a quiet, formal affair. Leo refused to look at me. He just signed where? His lawyers told him to, his hand trembling slightly. He walked away with $5 million, still a fortune. But a diminished one, forever tied to the woman he had underestimated. A year later, I sat in the audience at a chic downtown event. It was the award ceremony for the very first recipient of the Viridian Grant. A brilliant young woman with a plan for an innovative, sustainable cidery was on stage accepting a check for $100,000. Her voice thick with emotion as she talked about what this chance meant to her. I wasn't on stage. My name was only mentioned in the program. But as I watched her, I felt a sense of completion that no amount of money could ever have. Bought the pain Leo had caused me had been real. But I had taken that pain and transformed it. I had turned it into my own business. I had turned it into a legal victory. And tonight I had turned it into a legacy. A legacy of strength, of value, and of new beginnings. I had lost a fiancé, but I had found my worth. I had used it to help other women find theirs too. The Viridian Grant became a quiet cornerstone of my life. Each year I sat on the selection committee reading through business plans from brilliant, hopeful women. I saw my own past reflected in their applications, the meticulous details, shoestring budgets, the sheer force of will required. To bring a dream to life, we funded a woman who started a mobile bookstore for underserved neighborhoods, a chef who opened a farm-table restaurant, and a software engineer who developed an app to help domestic abuse survivors. With every success, the scar left by Leo faded a little more, replaced by a profound sense of purpose. My company, Viridian Design, flourished. We became known not just for our clean aesthetics, but for our ironclad contracts and our fierce advocacy for the value of creative work. I had inadvertently become a mentor to my clients, especially the young ones, guiding them on how to protect their intellectual property. The lessons Leo had taught me in the cruelest way possible had become the foundation of my professional ethics. About 4 years after the acquisition, I was invited to give the keynote address at my old university's annual Women in Business conference. The topic they suggested was the architecture of a brand. I was to be the closing speaker, the grand finale to a day of inspiration and networking. The irony was not lost on me. The last time I had felt such public pressure, I was being vilified in a blog post for taking a stand against my ex-fiancé. Now, I was being celebrated as a role model. Preparing the speech was an act of excavation. I went back through my old files, digging up the original Ascent Brewery materials. I laid them out on my large conference table, the napkin sketch of the mountain logo, the early drafts of the labels, the color palettes. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if looking at the work of a talented but painfully naive student. The designer was good, but she had been a fool in love, blind to the fact that she was building a temple for a man who would refuse to let her worship in it. I remembered his words, the ones that had shattered my world: lose some weight. For the brand, he had wanted me to shrink. But everything that had happened since the lawsuit, the IP battle, the Viridian Grant had been an act of expansion. Of taking up more space in the world, not less. Out of a morbid curiosity, I did a search for the new Ascent Brewery under Global Brews management. The brand was still successful, but it was different. They had retired my designs as stipulated. The new logo was a generic, corporate-looking mountain devoid of personality. The labels were glossy and loud. I read some recent reviews of the beer. The consensus was that while the quality was consistent, it had lost its heart, its soul. It was just another product on the shelf. Leo was still involved in a consulting capacity, his name occasionally mentioned in press releases. But his brand, the one that was supposed to be his great legacy, had been hollowed out. It was a ghost of what we had built. I felt no satisfaction in this, only a quiet confirmation that authenticity cannot be bought or sold. It must be earned. The night of the keynote, the auditorium was packed. Hundreds of young women, their faces bright with ambition, looked up at me as I approached the podium. I took a deep breath, the spotlight warm on my face. I said, aside my prepared notes, I decided to tell them the truth. Good evening. I began, my voice steady and clear, echoing through the large hall. The topic I was given tonight is the architecture of a brand, and I am going to talk about that. But to do that, I have to tell you a story about the day my own brand, my personal brand, was almost destroyed. I told them my story. I didn't use Leo's name. I simply referred to him as my partner. I spoke of the shared dream, the passion, and the work. Spoke of the $50,000 investment. And then I told them about the moment he told me my body was a problem his brand needed to solve. A quiet gasp went through the auditorium. Could see looks of shock, of anger, of painful recognition on the faces in the crowd. I was told my value was conditional, I said. I was told that to fit into the picture of success, I had to become smaller. And for a time, I believed it. I felt small. But then I realized something. My value was not in his opinion of me. My value was in my work. It was in my talent. It was in the brand I had built for him, for free, out of love and trust. I walked them through the lawsuit, through the fight for my intellectual property. I spoke about the importance of contracts, of valuing your own contributions, especially when you are a woman in a world that will often encourage you to be accommodating, to be helpful, to give your work away for the good of the team. A brand is not a logo, I told them, my voice ringing with the conviction of hard-earned experience. A brand is not a color palette. A brand is a promise. Your personal brand is the promise you make to yourself about your own worth. Never let anyone, a client, a boss, or a partner convince you to put yourself on sale. Your integrity is your most valuable asset. It is the one part of your brand that no one can ever buy. I concluded by telling them about the Viridian grant. The worst moment of my life became the catalyst for my greatest achievement. I said, because I took the money and the power I won for myself and I decided to invest it in other women. I decided that my legacy wouldn't be the brand I created for a man who didn't deserve it. My legacy would be the brands that are now being created by women who do. That is the architecture of a brand. You build it on a foundation of your own unshakable value. When I finished, there was a moment of stunned silence, followed by an eruption of applause that felt like a physical wave. It rolled over me, a powerful emotional validation that was more satisfying than any settlement check. After the speech, I was surrounded. Young women crowded around me, asking for advice, sharing their own stories, their eyes shining with a new sense of determination. As the crowd began to thin, a young woman who couldn't have been more than 20 years old approached me hesitantly. She was clutching a notebook, her expression a mixture of awe and terror. "Miss Grace," she said, her voice barely a whisper. That was, "Thank you. I have this idea for an app, but I'm so afraid to even start. I'm afraid I'm not enough." I looked at her and I saw myself. I saw the fear, but underneath it, I saw the same spark of ambition that had once burned in me. I put my hand on her arm. "The world will give you 1,000 reasons why you're not enough," I told her, my voice soft but firm. "Don't you dare be one of them. Your fear is real, but your value is real too. Go build your app. And when you're ready for a logo, you call me. It's the first one's on the house." A slow, brilliant smile spread across her face, full of hope and possibility. In her eyes, I saw the future. I saw another Viridian grant recipient, another story waiting to be written. I had started this journey by fighting for what a man owed me. I ended it by understanding what I owed myself and what we all owed to each other. Its scales were balanced, not just for me, but for the countless women who would come after. And that was a legacy worth building. The keynote speech should have been the end of the story. In any sane telling of my life, the applause in that auditorium would have been the final punctuation mark. A life lesson learned, a victory. A legacy secured. But a legacy isn't a monument that stands frozen in time. It's a garden. It has to be tended. It has to grow. And sometimes the most beautiful stories are the ones that grow in the soil you prepared for someone else. The money I gave you for the brewery, I said, my stomach twisting. My inheritance, you promised you'd pay me back. I think you're mistaken, he said, his voice like ice. That was a gift, a contribution to the life we were building together. Since you decided to end that life, I'd say you forfeited your investment. You're not on any of the paperwork, Grace. There's nothing that says I owe you a dime. He hung up. I stared at my phone, the silence on the other end, a final, definitive slap in the face. He wasn't just going to break my heart. He was going to steal my future. He thought I was the same soft, accommodating Grace who would just cry and give up. He thought I would be too broken to fight back. He was wrong. The grief that had been weighing me down began to burn away, replaced by a cold, hard rage. He wanted to talk about paperwork. Fine, we could talk about paperwork. I wasn't a lawyer, but I was a designer. I knew the value of my work, and I was meticulous. I had saved everything. I called a lawyer, my friend Sarah. Recommended? Her name was Anya, and she was a shark in a tailored suit with a take-no-prisoners attitude. I walked into her office with a single, perfectly organized binder. He says it was a gift, I told her. Says I have no proof. I opened the binder. Inside was the bank statement showing the wire transfer of exactly $50,000 from my personal account to Scent Brewery, LLC. There were printouts of a dozen emails between me and Leo, with subject lines like brewery investment and payback plan, where we discussed terms. There were text messages where he thanked me for saving the business with my loan. And then there was my masterpiece, a complete portfolio of every piece of design work I had ever done for a scent brewery, from the first napkin, sketch of the logo to the final print-ready files for the bottle labels, all with digital timestamps proving their creation dates. Anya looked through the binder, her expression shifting from professional skepticism to a slow, predatory smile. "Oh, he doesn't just owe you $50,000, honey," she said, closing the binder with a sharp, final snap. "He owes you for 3 years of professional design work. He owes you for building his entire brand identity. We're not just getting your inheritance back. We're going to send him a bill. We filed a civil suit. Complaint listed breach of oral contract, unjust enrichment, and a separate claim for quantum merit, legal term for the market value of services rendered. When Leo was served with a lawsuit, he tried to laugh it off, calling it a desperate move by a bitter ex-fiancée. His arrogance would be his undoing. The legal process ground on for months. The climax was the deposition. Sat across a long, polished table in a sterile conference room. Me, Anya, Leo, and his smug, expensive lawyer. Leo, under oath, began to lie. He claimed the $50,000 was a no-strings-attached gift to him personally. He claimed the design work was just a hobby, something I did for fun. Anya let him dig his own grave. Then she began. "Mr. Leo," she said calmly, "I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit A. Is this your signature?" "On a rental application for the brewery space," Gessie said. "And on that application, under source of funds, did you write personal investment and partner loan?" His face paled. He'd forgotten about that. "And now for Exhibit B," Anya continued, sliding an email across the table. "This is an email from you to Ms. Grace. Dated October 17th. Could you please read the first sentence aloud for the record?" Leo stared at the paper, his jaw tight. "Gracie, thank God for your loan," he read in a mumble. "The equipment vendor just called, and your $50K saved my ass." One by one, Anya presented the evidence. The texts, the emails, the business plans that mentioned a silent partner. With every exhibit, Leo's composure crumbled. The final blow was the design portfolio. "You claim Ms. Grace's work was a hobby," Anya said. "I have here an itemized invoice for professional branding services, including logo, design, packaging, and web development from 3 separate local design firms. The average market rate for the work Ms. Grace performed for your brewery is $93,000. Since you have no contract or record of payment for these professional services, when did you intend to compensate her for building your entire brand? Leo stared at the invoices, then at me. For the first time, he looked scared. The arrogant king of craft beer was gone. In his place was a small, petty man caught in a lie under oath. He had nothing but his lawyer, seeing the train wreck unfolding, abruptly called for a break. 2 days later, they offered to settle. They didn't just offer me my $50,000 back. The settlement was for $150,000, the original loan, plus interest, and a hefty payment for my design work. It also included a clause that I was to be formally credited as the original brand designer on the company's website. My victory was total. The day this settlement check cleared, I didn't feel elation. I felt a quiet, profound sense of peace. I had faced the man who broke my heart and my bank account, and I had won. Not through screaming or crying, but through competence, preparation, and the undeniable value of my own work. I used the money to start my own freelance design business. I rented a small, sunny apartment for myself. I was finally building my own dream, on my own terms. About a year later, I was in a grocery store and I saw it. A 6-pack of Ascent Brewery's signature stout. The logo I had sketched on a napkin sat proudly on the label. I picked it up and looked at it. I didn't feel a single pang of sadness or regret. I just felt pride, not in him, but in me. I had created that. I had built that. My fiancé told me to lose weight, to shrink myself to fit into his life. Instead, I left him, sued him, and learned how to take up my own space in the world, and it was a much better fit. The $150,000 wasn't just money. It was a resurrection. It was the capital I used to found my own graphic design agency, which I named Viridian Design. The name was a private joke, a nod to the vibrant green shoots of new growth. I poured all the energy I had once dedicated to Ascent Brewery into my own business. I worked tirelessly building a client list from scratch. Kai designed logos for artisanal bakeries, created websites for boutique hotels. Kai and crafted brand identities for startups full of the same wide-eyed hope, Leo. And I once shared, the difference was, this time I had ironclad contracts. My work was my own, and its value was never in question. 2 years passed. Viridian Design was a success. I had a small, bright office downtown, 2 talented young designers working for me, and a reputation for creating clean, impactful work. The memory of Leo, of his betrayal and the ensuing legal battle, had faded from a raw, gaping wound to a thin, silvery scar. It was a part of my history, a reminder of a lesson learned, but it no longer had the power to hurt me. I was dating again, cautiously, and learning to trust not just others, but my own judgment. I was happy. Truly, peacefully happy. Then one Tuesday morning, the past sent me a calendar invite. My friend Sarah, the same one whose couch had been my refuge, sent me a link to an article in the city's business journal. The headline read, "Ascent Brewery nears multi-million-dollar acquisition by Global Brew Corp." I clicked the link. The article detailed how the beverage giant was looking to acquire a portfolio of successful craft brands, and Ascent was at the top of their list. It mentioned Leo's visionary leadership and the brand's iconic and highly marketable identity. There was a picture of Leo standing in front of his tanks, looking older, more strained, but radiating an air of smug success. I felt a flicker of something annoyance, maybe, but it was distant. It's like watching a movie about someone else's life. Good for him, I thought, and closed the tab. It had nothing to do with me. I was wrong. A week later, a thick envelope arrived at my office via courier. It was from the legal department of Global Brew Corp. Inside was a 10-page document and a cover letter written in the most condescending legalese imaginable. The letter stated that as part of their due diligence for the acquisition of Ascent Brewery, they were tidying up the intellectual property portfolio and required my signature on the enclosed copyright transfer and quitclaim agreement. It was a standard corporate form that would assign all rights, titles, and interests in any and all creative works I had ever produced for Ascent Brewery to Global Brew Corp. Forever, throughout the universe, in exchange for signing away the entire brand identity I had created. They were offering a goodwill consideration of $1,000. My life found a new rhythm. Viridian design thrived, and the Viridian Grant became a prestigious, sought-after honor. I was busy, fulfilled, and at peace. The raw, jagged edges of my past had been worn smooth by time and purpose. I thought less and less about Leo, and when I did, it was with a kind of academic pity. He was a case study in my own head, a lesson on the corrosive nature of an ambition untethered from integrity. 3 years after the first grant was awarded, I received an invitation. It was to the grand opening of a restaurant called Hearth. It was the passion project of Maya, the very first recipient of the Viridian Grant, the young chef who had wanted to build a farm-table restaurant, who had come to us with brilliant recipes and a shoebox full of maxed-out credit cards. I remembered her interview vividly. The fire in her eyes, the way she spoke about food, not as a product, but as a connection to the land and to community. Giving her the grant had been one of the easiest decisions the committee ever made. I went to the opening, not as a benefactor or a VIP, but as a quiet supporter. I brought Anya with me. We sat at a small table in the corner, content to observe. The restaurant was stunning, was warm and inviting, built with reclaimed wood and exposed brick. The air smelled of roasting garlic, fresh bread, and success. The place was packed, buzzing with the happy energy of a dream realized. Maya was a whirlwind, moving between the kitchen and the dining room. Her face flushed with excitement and exhaustion, a smudge of flour on her cheek. She looked radiant. Anya clinked her wineglass against mine. "Anya," she said, a rare, genuine smile on her face. "Of all the settlements I've ever won, this is by far the most satisfying return on investment." "Tell me about it," I said, my heart feeling full to the point of bursting. This was real. This bustling, beautiful place. It had been born from the ugliest moment of my life. It was alchemy. It's a transformation of pain into purpose, of loss into legacy. Later that evening, Maya came to our table. She hugged me tightly. "Thank you for coming, Grace," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "None of this would be here without you." "You're wrong," I told her, pulling back to look her in the eye. "This is all here because of you, your talent, your vision, your hard work. The grant was just a key. You were the one who had the courage to turn it in the lock." She smiled, wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. "That's what you told me in our first mentorship meeting," she said. I never forgot it. As the night wound down and the last of the happy patrons drifted out into the cool night air, Anya and I prepared to leave. Across the room, I saw Maya standing by the kitchen door, talking to her staff. She looked over and our eyes met. She gave me a small, profound nod of gratitude. It was a gesture that contained everything: the shared understanding of a struggle, the joy of a victory, the quiet bond of a legacy being passed from one woman to another. As we walked out into the street, I found myself thinking not about my own story, but about hers. I had lived my narrative, but I was only the first chapter of hers. I wondered what her story felt like from the inside. From Maya's perspective, my dream tasted like ash. For 2 years, I had been trying to get a loan to open Hearth. I had a perfect business plan, recipes that I knew in my bones, were special, and relationships with local farmers who were ready to supply me. But every bank I went to saw the same thing: a young woman with no collateral and a high-risk idea. They didn't see the vision. They saw the liability. I was working double shifts as a line cook, the heat of the grill searing my face while my own dream grew cold. I was just about to give up. to resign myself to a life of cooking someone else's food, building someone else's dream. Night, scrolling aimlessly through my phone after a grueling 16-hour shift, I saw a small sponsored post announcing the Viridian Grant for female entrepreneurs. I almost scrolled past it, assuming it was for tech startups or something far outside my world. But the name Viridian caught my eye. I clicked. I read the story of its founder, Grace. The article was vague on the details, but it spoke of a legal battle of a woman who had fought to establish the value of her own work and had then used her victory to create opportunities for others. It resonated with a painful, powerful clarity. I felt like I was reading the story of a battle I was currently losing. On a whim, fueled by exhaustion and a final, desperate surge of hope, I applied. I poured my entire being into that application. I wrote about my grandmother's recipes, about the importance of sustainable farming, about creating a community around a table. I sent it off at 3 a.m. and promptly forgot about it, assuming it was a message in a bottle I had tossed into an indifferent ocean. When I was selected as a finalist, I thought it was a mistake. The final interview was with a committee of 5, but I only saw one person, Grace. She was poised and powerful, her reputation preceding her. I was terrified. When I started talking about my food, my dream, the terror melted away. The other committee members asked about my financial projections and my marketing plan. Grace asked about my passion. She asked me what scared me the most. She asked me what integrity meant to me. It was the strangest, most human job interview of my life. I left feeling like I had been seen, truly seen, for the first time. Winning the grant was like being struck by lightning. It was $100,000, but it was also so much more. It was a validation that my dream wasn't foolish. It came with a mentor, Grace. Our first meeting was in her design office. I expected a corporate hands-off benefactor. Instead, I got a trench warfare general. She went through my business plan line by line. She was tough, demanding, and brutally honest. She tore apart my marketing budget and helped me rebuild it, making it twice as effective for half the cost. She introduced me to a contractor who wouldn't rip me off. She personally reviewed the logo I'd hired a young designer to create. "It's good," she'd said, "but make sure you own the copyright explicitly, in writing. Trust me on this." She never told me the specifics of her story, but she didn't have to. It was there in her advice, in her fierce insistence that I know my worth and protect it at all costs. She wasn't just my benefactor, she was my shield. On the opening night of Hearth, as I looked around at the full tables, at the smiling faces, at the dream that was now a breathing, living reality, I understood. My restaurant was built on the foundation of her pain. The money that had funded my dream had been ransomed from her heartbreak. That was a heavy, sacred trust. At the end of the night, when the last table had been cleared and my staff was gone, I stood alone in the quiet dining room. I saw Grace and her friend leaving. I met her eyes across the room and nodded. It was the only thank you I could offer that felt big enough. In that look, I was promising her that I understood, that I would honor the legacy, that her fight had not been in vain. I locked the front door of my restaurant, and leaned my head against the cool glass. I had a new dream now, a dream that one day, years from now, I would be successful enough to find a young woman full of talent and fear, and I would help her. I would give her a key. Because that's what Grace had done for me. She had turned her story into a key, and she had trusted me to build a door worthy of it. The garden was growing. The years that followed were not a story of dramatic courtroom showdowns or corporate battles. They were quieter, more profound. A legacy, I learned, isn't forged in a single fiery moment of victory. It's built in the steady, patient work that comes after. It's in the choices made when no one is watching, in the quiet affirmations of a life lived with principle. Sometimes I would think of the anniversary. Not of our engagement, not of our first date, but of the day I left. The day he told me to shrink. I came to think of it not as the day my heart broke, but as the day it was set free. On that day each year, I didn't mourn. I would buy myself a single, perfect peony, its petals tightly furled, and I would place it in a vase on my desk. Over the next few days, I would watch it slowly, magnificently open up, taking up more and more space, becoming more beautiful with every degree of expansion. It was a private, silent ritual, a reminder that the most beautiful things refused to be small. I saw his name only once more. Leo's. It was a small item in an alumni magazine, a Where Are They Now feature. He had sold his remaining interest in Ascent Brewery to Global Brew and had, according to the article, retired to pursue private ventures. The photo showed him on a sailboat, tanned and smiling, but his eyes looked hollow, empty. There was no mention of the brewery's origins, no mention of my name, and certainly no mention of the Viridian grant. It was a sanitized history, a life edited to remove all the inconvenient truths. I felt nothing looking at it. He was a stranger on a boat, a ghost from a different lifetime. He had his money, but he had lost the story. I had kept the story, and I had learned it was worth infinitely more. Leo always tasted of ambition. When I kissed him, I could taste the faint hoppy bitterness of the IPAs he was always testing. But underneath it was something sharper, more metallic. It was the taste of wanting. For 7 years, I had loved that taste. I thought it was the flavor of our future, the shared dream we were building one perfectly crafted beer at a time. It turned out to be the taste of rust. We were a team. That's what he always said. We're a team, Gracie. He was the visionary, the brewmaster, the charismatic face of what would become Ascent Brewery. I was the foundation, the scaffolding, the one who made the vision possible. I was a graphic designer, and my signature was on every part of Ascent before a single drop of beer was ever sold. I designed the elegant, minimalist mountain logo that would eventually adorn thousands of pint glasses. I created the labels, the website, the menus, the marketing materials. My nights and weekends were spent hunched over my laptop, tweaking shades of cobalt blue and arguing about fonts, all for the love of him and our shared dream. But my investment wasn't just sweat equity. It was cold, hard cash. When Leo needed the seed money to lease a space and buy the gleaming stainless steel tanks, I didn't hesitate. I took the $50,000 my grandmother had left me money I had carefully earmarked for a down payment on a house, and I transferred it directly into the business. Count for Ascent Brewery LLC. It was everything I had. This is for us, I'd said, my hand over his on the mouse as we clicked confirm on the bank transfer. An investment in our future. Our future, he'd repeated, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted of hope. We never signed a formal contract. We were engaged. We were a team. Our love was supposed to be a contract stronger than any document a lawyer could draft. We agreed that once the business was profitable, he would pay me back. Or better yet, I'd be a formal partner. It was a conversation we had over pizza and beer, full of easy promises and shared excitement. I had no reason to doubt him. I had the emails, the texts, the bank records. But more than that, I had 7 years of history. I had trust, and that was my biggest mistake. The first 2 years were a frantic, exhilarating grind. We poured everything into the brewery. We painted the walls of the tap room. Ourselves, our clothes splattered with gray paint, and our laughter echoing in the cavernous space. We celebrated every small victory. The first perfect batch of his signature stout. The first 5-star review online. The first time we heard a stranger at another bar order an Ascent IPA. The business grew slowly at first, then all at once. Leo was a genius at his craft, and people noticed. A local magazine did a feature on him, calling him the King of Craft. His face, handsome and confident, smiled out from the glossy page. The article mentioned his unwavering vision and relentless dedication. Never mentioned my name. It never mentioned my $50,000. When I brought it up, He'd laughed it off. They wanted to focus on the brewmaster angle, babe. Do you know how? This stuff works. Everyone who matters knows you're the secret weapon. And I believed him. But as the brewery's success grew, something in Leo began to change. The we slowly became I. He started talking about his vision, his success. He spent more time with local influencers and industry people and less time with me. A subtle distance grew between us, a coolness where there had once been warmth. He started making small comments, little criticisms that felt like tiny paper cuts. He'd critique my outfit before a brewery event, or suggest I stand out of the photo when a blogger wanted a picture of him. He was curating an image, a brand. And I was beginning to feel like I didn't fit into it. The moment it all shattered came on a sunny Saturday afternoon. We were supposed to be planning our wedding, a small ceremony we had put off until the brewery was stable. I had brought home a stack of bridal magazines, my heart full of a hopeful romantic flutter. I was sitting on the floor flipping through pages of lace dresses and floral arrangements. "What do you think of this one?" I asked, holding up a picture of a beautiful Align gown. Leo didn't look at the magazine. He looked at me. He had a strange, critical expression on his face. It's the same one he got when tasting a batch of beer that wasn't quite right. He sat down on the couch across from me, his posture serious. "Gracie," he began, his voice taking on a gentle, patronizing tone that set my teeth on edge. "We need to talk about something." My heart faltered. "'Kay? The wedding is going to be a big event for the brand," he said, as if discussing a product launch. "There are going to be a lot of photos, a lot of press. Everything needs to be perfect." "I want it to be perfect too," I said, confused. He took a deep breath. "Look, you know I love you, but I've been thinking, and I think it would be really great for you and for us and for the wedding photos if you maybe toned up a bit." The words hung in the air, ugly and sharp. I stared at him. Sure, I had misheard. "What did you just say?" He forged ahead, oblivious to the devastation he was causing. "Just, lose some weight. Maybe 15, 20 pounds. You've gotten a little? It's comfortable since we started the brewery. I just want you to look your best. For me, for the brand, for the brand." The words echoed in the sudden, ringing silence of the room. He wasn't talking to his fiancée. He was talking to a problematic asset. My body, the body he had held and claimed to love for 7 years, was now a flaw in his perfect, curated life. The love I felt for him didn't just die. It curdled, turned into something cold and heavy in the pit of my stomach. I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in a long time. I didn't see the ambitious, passionate man I had fallen in love with. I saw a stranger, a shallow, cruel man whose ambition had consumed his heart. I saw a narcissist who viewed the woman he was supposed to marry as a branding accessory that needed to be trimmed down to fit the packaging. Tears welled in my eyes, hot and bitter. "Are you listening to yourself?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "Do you want me to lose weight for your brand?" He had the audacity to look annoyed, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "Don't be so sensitive, Grace. I'm just being honest. I'm a business owner now. Image is everything. Just thinking about our future. Our future." I stood up, the bridal magazine sliding from my lap. "There is no our future. There is only your future, and I will not be a part of it." That was it. The end of 7 years, decided in a single brutal moment. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. A terrifying calm settled over me. I went into our bedroom and packed a suitcase. Leo followed me, protesting, trying to backtrack, telling me I was overreacting. But I didn't hear him. The man I loved was gone. This person was a stranger. I took off my engagement ring, the diamond that was supposed to symbolize our unbreakable bond, and I placed it on the kitchen counter. "Don't worry, Leo," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "Okay, I won't tarnish your brand anymore." And I walked out the door. The first few weeks were a haze of grief. I stayed on my friend Sarah's couch, buried under a duvet, feeling like a building that had collapsed into its own foundation. The emotional pain was overwhelming, but soon another kind of pain began to surface. Financial panic. I had nothing. My savings were gone, poured into a business that was now part of a life I had been brutally ejected from. Freelance design work had dwindled because I'd been dedicating all my free time to Ascent Brewery. I was 31 years old, homeless, and broke. I had to get my money back. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about survival. I called Leo. He was cold, distant. "Grace, now isn't a good time," he said, his voice clipped. "I need my $50,000 back, Leo," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He laughed. Short, sharp, ugly sound. "What $50,000? The ripples of that story continued to spread in ways I never could have anticipated. One afternoon, I received a call from Anya. "You're not going to believe this," she said, and I could hear the laughter in her voice. "I just got off the phone with a lawyer from Julian Croft's old firm. They have a new client, a young fashion designer whose partner, a man, tried to steal her portfolio and lock her out of the company they built together. She's suing him." "Good for her," I said. "That's not the point," Anya continued. "Their firm is representing the woman. The partner who called me wanted to consult on the case to understand the precedent we set. He said your case, the one against Leo, has become required reading in their firm for new associates. They use it as a textbook example of how to value and litigate intellectual property in a partnership dispute. You've become required reading for your enemies, Grace. You didn't just beat them. You forced them to learn from you." The work of the Viridian Grant continued, a quiet, powerful engine of change. We funded a woman who created a STEM tutoring program for girls in low-income neighborhoods. We funded a pair of sisters who launched a sustainable packaging company. Each year at the award ceremony, I would see the new recipients, their faces glowing with that familiar mixture of terror and hope, and I saw how the circle was widening. Maya, the chef from our first year, had become a mentor herself. Her restaurant, Hearth, had a formal apprenticeship program for young female cooks. She would send her best and brightest to us when they were ready to start their own ventures. The garden was seeding itself. One cool autumn evening, I was walking home from my office. I took a detour through the neighborhood where the Westgate Arms stood. It's a building full of tenants I had once fought for in a different life, a different story. I hadn't been back in years. It looked peaceful, well-maintained. An old woman was watering the flower boxes on her balcony. It was Alina Rodriguez. She was older, more frail, but her smile was as bright as ever when she saw me. She waved, and I waved back. No words were necessary. It was a simple acknowledgement, a shared piece of history. A reminder that the fight for one person's home can become the fight for a principle that protects thousands. My own home was my sanctuary. My condo was filled with light, with books, with the art of friends. It was a space I had earned, a space that was entirely my own. There was no slanted floor, no one to tell me I was taking up too much space. I had learned the difference between a house built with a partner and a home you built within yourself. My work at Viridian Design was my joy. I loved the craft of it, the puzzle of translating a company's soul into a color, a shape, a font. My favorite clients were always the startups, the ones with more passion than money. I often gave them a discount, my own small, unpublicized version of the grant. My business was successful enough that I could afford to invest in the people I believed in. It was the ultimate luxury. One evening, after a long but satisfying week, I was on my balcony, tending to the small herb garden I kept in pots. The city sprawled before me, a vast, glittering tapestry of a million other stories. I gently pinched a leaf of basil, the sharp, clean scent rising to meet me. I thought about the simple act of nurturing something, of giving it what it needs to grow: some water, patience. It wasn't so different from building a business or a legacy. My life was not a dramatic movie anymore. There were no more courtroom showdowns, no more corporate villains to vanquish. The great battles had been fought, the great victories won. What was left was the quiet daily work of living a life in alignment with the values I had fought so hard for. It was the work of tending the garden, making small, good choices, showing up for the people you believe in, of mentoring a young designer, of watching a peony unfold. A cool breeze rustled the leaves of my basil plant. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The air didn't taste of ambition or rust. It tasted of the earth, of growing things. It tasted of peace, and I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my soul that it was the only flavor I had ever truly wanted. The story wasn't over. It never really is. It had simply become a different kind of story, quieter, deeper, and finally entirely my own. The story of a life, like that of a business, eventually moves from the drama of its founding to the steady, quiet rhythm of its existence. Grace's battles were won, her peace was earned, and her legacy was no longer a fight but a living, breathing entity in the world. To continue her story is to look not for a new conflict, but at the lasting texture of the world she reshaped here. Then are the documents of that legacy, fragments and echoes from a future she built. Appendix A. The Viridian Grant official press release 5 years post-inception. For immediate RELZ, the Viridian Grant announces 5th annual call for applications, championing female leadership in creative industries. NOW York. NY. The Viridian Grant, the prestigious funding and mentorship program funded by celebrated designer and entrepreneur Grace is pleased to announce its 5th annual call for applications. The grant seeks to empower the next generation of female leaders in the craft beverage, hospitality, and design sectors. This year, one exceptional entrepreneur will be awarded a $100,000 seed grant, along with a comprehensive mentorship package from a committee of industry leaders, including Ms. Grace herself, founded on the principle that true value lies in integrity and authenticity. The Viridian Grant has become a powerful catalyst for change. As Ms. Grace stated in her now famous keynote address at the Women in Business Conference, "We are not just funding businesses. We are investing in a future where a woman's vision is her most valuable asset, and her self-worth is her most protected intellectual property." The grant's impact is already clear. The inaugural recipient, Chef Maya, successfully launched her critically acclaimed farm-to-table restaurant, Hearth, which has earned numerous accolades for its sustainable practices and culinary excellence. Subsequent grantees have included the founders of a mobile bookstore for underserved communities, an award-winning sustainable packaging firm, and a STEM tutoring program for young girls. Applications are open until December 31st. The committee is looking for not just a solid business plan, but a story of passion, a commitment to community, and a vision that extends beyond the balance sheet. For more information or to apply, visit veridiangrant.org. Appendix B. Excerpt from an interview with Grace in Design and Dialogue Magazine D&D. Grace, your firm Viridian Design is known for its incredible work, but also for its fierce advocacy for creatives. You've become a mentor to many. What's the single most common mistake you see young designers make? Grace, they undervalue themselves. It's almost a default setting. They do brilliant work, and then, at the crucial moment, they say, "Oh, whatever you think is fair," or they work for exposure. It's a habit born from passion, but it's a dangerous one. I learned a long time ago, in a very personal way, that if you do not define your own value, the world will be more than happy to define it for you. And it will always be for a fraction of what you are worth. D&D. So, your advice is? Grace, get it in writing always. A contract isn't a sign of distrust, it's a sign of professionalism. It's a document that honors the work. And when you are negotiating, never be afraid to ask for what you deserve. The client who respects you will respect your price. The one who doesn't was never the right client to begin with. Your talent is not a discount bin. It's the entire store. D&D. You famously walked away from a brand you created. How do you advise designers on letting go of their work? Grace, you have to know what you own. You own the file, the copyright, the intellectual property, but you don't own the brand's future once it's sold. Letting go is part of the job. For me, that particular brand was a powerful lesson, but it was also a ghost. I had to let it go to make room for my own life. I think the healthiest way to view our work is that we are architects. We design a beautiful, strong house. We build it with integrity. But eventually, someone else has to live in it. Your job is to move on and build another, even better house. Your legacy isn't one design. It's the quality and integrity you bring to all of them. Appendix C. Industry note from the Beverage Bulletin. Digital edition, where are they now? The ascent of Leo. Remember Ascent Brewery. The craft darling that took the city by storm nearly a decade ago before its blockbuster acquisition by Global Brew Corp. We checked in on its founder, Leo. After exiting the beer world, Leo has fully embraced the world of private equity. From his new home base in Monaco, he now manages a portfolio of international investments, primarily in luxury real estate and tech. While Ascent Brewery continues under the Global Brew umbrella, industry insiders note it has struggled to maintain its original soul, becoming a high-volume mid-shelf brand rather than the craft leader it once was. Leo, it seems, successfully cashed in his creation, proving that while passion may build a brand, it's venture capital that builds an empire abroad. Appendix D. A letter to the Viridian Grant Committee, Ms. Grace, and the esteemed committee. My name is Sarah Chen, and I am a 24-year-old architectural student. I am writing to you not just as an applicant for your incredible grant, but as someone who feels she owes her current path to you. A year ago, I was close to dropping out of my program. I am the first person in my family to go to college, and the pressure, both financial and personal, was overwhelming. I felt like an imposter. I watched a video of your keynote speech online, and your words, your fear is real. But your value is real too. We're a lifeline. My application is for a business called the Blueprint Collective. It is a plan for an affordable, shared workspace and resource center for young women and minorities in the architecture and industrial design fields where we are still vastly underrepresented. It is a plan to build a space where no one feels like an imposter again. I don't know if my application will be successful, but what I know for sure is that because of you and the story of how you fought for your own value, I didn't drop out. I finished my degree with honors. I created this business plan. I found my own worth. Whatever the outcome, thank you. Thank you for building the house that has given so many of us the shelter to dream. Sincerely, Sarah Chen.